We're going to move on to our next question, which comes from Sarah Johnson, who extends an Assalamu alaikum to the panel. Assalamu alaikum, and thank you. And Jazakumullah, Sarah, for your question. This concerns the whole concept of evolution and the Darwinian theory. We have previously covered this in the program, and I think Sarah has watched that particular response. And there were a few questions and comments she had in this, and let me just put the sort of question in context. First of all, she talks about how if the human being that we know today is the ultimate person and we have finished evolution, she then talks of how different people or different communities, for example, she quotes Africans and Indians have long thin limbs to help them perspire in hot climates. Similarly, those who live in mountains have larger lungs to pump extra oxygen, and there's certain societies which have become immune to certain diseases, and she quotes these as examples and asks the question, and perhaps Amir, we can start with you on this, that is this not examples of how evolution is still occurring? But her quite specific questions are that evolution shouldn't just be about mutilation or something changing, so a person going from having 2 eyes to 3. Can the panel address the definition of evolution and explain what's so objectionable of the theory of Darwin in an Islamic light? And she also quotes that there have been recent discoveries which demonstrate that humans were initially quite primitive, and are these not demonstrable of, as she quotes, stepping stones towards what we know as man today? But Ahmed, starting with you on this question, it is something we've covered before, but Sarah's quite right to ask certain questions, that's why we're here, so over to you.
So in terms of evolution is a fundamental question which is on the mind of every single person. It's incited thousands of articles, programs, documentaries, and the question is, how did life come from a lifeless earth? How did that jump come from nothing to life, and then how did that life evolve to our current state in which man has been formed? And over the years there have been so many different theories. For hundreds of years, since the time of Aristotle, they believed in things like spontaneous generation. They believed in concepts in which species had formed in different ways, until the 18th or 19th or 17th century, when Darwinian theory came into play. And that is a predominant theory that is still accepted today. And Darwinian theory basically states that we as humans, as a species, formed out of another species. And the way it works is that from one species, they have genes within them, and when it passes from one generation to the other, mutations occur. And through a process of natural selection as it occurs, beneficial mutations occur which enact its survival, which allows it to pass on and survive in the best possible way. So the disadvantageous genes are left behind, and the beneficial advantageous genes are passed to the next generation, as we call it survival of the fittest, and this is called natural selection. And over time, over thousands or millions of years, these mutations keep on occurring until, according to this theory, an entirely new species formed. So this is how, in theory, we have come from apes to humans. This is the essence of Darwinian theory. In terms of going back to what he's saying, that isn't Darwinian theory mean that it should adapt rather than forming something which is not needed, for example, an extra arm or an extra eye? From my humble understanding, I would agree with them that this is the Darwinian theory, that it adapts according to the need. So, for example, in the current time, we find even Kenyan runners who, because they live at an altitude, they have more oxygen intake, and they often can run longer distances. And there are people who have adapted according to the environment. There are two issues with this. One is, scientifically nowadays, there are people who are rebuking the Darwinian theory. And they say that Darwinian theory is something which modern science may be able to disprove. Now, one thing that Darwin has said himself in his book, The Origin of Species, he says in this that if it could be demonstrated that any complex organ existed which could not possibly have been formed by numerous successive slight modifications, my theory would absolutely break down. Now, this is a debate going on in the scientific community, and one scientist says that there are certain complex systems on a cellular level which prove that it was not formed out of this natural selection. And Darwin calls this the irreducibly complex system. He says, if this can be proved, my theory is debunked. So some scientists say that we have provided this. One scientist here says that although the tiniest bacterial cells are incredibly small, weighing less than 10 to the minus 12 grams, each is in effect a veritable micro-miniaturized factory containing thousands of exquisitely designed pieces of intricate molecular machinery, made up altogether of 100,000 million atoms, far more complicated than any machinery built by man, and absolutely without parallel in the non-living world. So on the one hand, there's a debate in the scientific community whether Darwinian theory actually holds up. But the actual crux, which perhaps this viewer has not mentioned here, which is the actual essence of the question, is, as Muslims, we believe God can do anything. He could have made apes into humans. We can, because God says kun fayakun. He says be, and He can make it into be, although we do not believe that happened. The essence is that according to Darwinian theory, this happened through natural selection. According to, for example, Dawkins, it happened through a random selection. What we say is that there was a specific designer who had a specific plan. This was a tools in his box of creation, which he enacted from the ancient times until now to form this. And this is the debate we have, that they say it is almost accidental or random. But what has been said by us is that what we see from the passing of one generation to the other is that every species is threatened with permanent extinction, and such a specific environment is created which enables that species to survive, including humans, from one generation to the other. If that balance shifts even a little bit, it would destroy that species. So this seems to indicate towards a specific, well chalked out, well thought out plan to pass on, to evolve through. So this is the Islamic belief. Unfortunately, the debate has become so polarized that as soon as you mention religion or a theological concept, they say this must be something from ancient times or irrational. But the basic Quranic concept is that man evolved from clay fermenting blackish mud, and also dust. This is mentioned in the Holy Quran. In terms of the scientific belief, I would refer people to the book by Hazrat Khalifa Masih IV, the fourth head of the Ahmadiyya community, Revelation, Rationality, Knowledge and Truth, where he has discussed this in detail and proof from scientists who are now supporting this view. The Darwinian theory still does not explain how that initial step came from lifelessness to life. It says that yes, it is evolved through, but who caused that lifelessness to form into life? And how did it happen that every generation so in perfect harmony, in perfect balance, survived from one place to the other? Just one example we can find is when people try to breed animals in different places. They try to bring certain creatures into other places to control animals, like for example the outbreak of rats or something like that. And often we find when they carry out this breeding, because they don't have that hand of the Creator, it leads to devastating effects where the ecosystem is entirely spoiled. So what we say again is that the Darwinian theory itself, there's a debate in the scientific community, but the actual issue that we have is that what we say is that there was a designer. That designer had a specific plan. This was a part of his well thought out plan to actually bring about the best environment for man, because man is said to be the best of creation. So that whole evolution was designed for the sake of man to be in his present form. So whilst we agree with the viewer that yes, that is probably the Darwinian theory in terms of what this person understands, the question which needs to be asked and answered is that how did that happen? This is not answered by any of these theories of evolution. How did that happen? How did life just come into life? How can it happen by itself? How can we believe that it happens by itself unless there was something which caused that to happen? So this is the essence.